Hello and welcome back to live coverage of the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational brought to you by TCGplayer.com. I'm Tandy, joined by Bomat. Say hi, Bomat.
Hi, Matt.
We are in day number 1 of the Invitational and we are doing pod play. We've just completed the first round. We'll be moving on to the second round here in just a moment. Bomat, why don't you give us a little bit of rundown of what we're going to be watching in round number 2?
Yeah, we're gonna start with Kurt Spiess, excuse me, playing Amber Steel. Kurt was one of the qualifiers from our LCQ last night, and he's playing Amber Steel. This has been a popular deck. I think 6 players on some variety of Amber Steel in our 16-player field, and this is a pretty normal build. 12 copies of Stitch and 8 copies of those powerful 5 ink songs.
Now, one thing I want to note is that Kurt is not playing any copies of Lilo Making a Wish because it's non-inkable and it has a lot of tension with those 5 cost songs. And it also just is pretty weak in a lot of the aggro v aggro matchups featuring
Right.
Steel. All of those AoE effects make it a little bit worse. And we're instead playing 4 copies of Simba, 1 drop from Steel, as well as 4 copies of Lantern to ramp into those Stitch Carefree Surfers.
Right. So then, speaking of Lilo, taking a look at the other side of the table, Frank Karsten also playing Amber Steel, but he is playing a much more aggressive build. You see those 4 copies of Lilo Making a Wish, 3 copies of Aladdin, Cornered Swordsman. Frank is Frank's an aggro player. Uh, really decided he wanted to go for an aggro strategy, and he's going to be prioritizing leading with Lilo into Simba.
All right, well, the players are in the feature match area and just about ready to start. So let's head on down and start round number 2 of the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational brought to you by TCGplayer.com, your leader for all things TCG related. So get your singles, get your, head on down the match. What are you doing? Wait, why are you still looking at me? I don't know. On your left, Frank Carson, Magic Hall of Famer. That's the wrong camera. On your left, Frank Karsten, Amber Steel. We got Dan May in the booth. Normally we got Taryn, but he decided to play this event. Dan is we're not from here. We're working on the fly, right? We we are working with what we got, so we're trying our best. We got Frank Karsten on your left, Magic Hall of Famer, Kurt Spiess on your right, both playing Amber Steel, Stitch Blitz aggro. This is in my opinion, the best deck in the format, and at least my favorite deck to play. Member of Team Ultimate Guard is Frank Carson, and repping those colors, Ultimate Guard is one of our sponsors for this event as well. Big shout out to them. Thank you so much for that. As these players are drawing their opening hands, we're going to see how they mulligan since we did get a little bit early. I know I talked a lot with Frank. He actually stayed with me all week, and we talked a little bit about the event and play tested some to help him out. And in this matchup, he likes to keep grab your sword in your opener. I told him that I like to mulligan every uninkable because I just like smooth draws. But if I have an aerial spectacular singer with that grab your sword, maybe we keep it because it's a nice little 3-4 curve.
Yeah. Speaking of songs, though, the other uninkable song in A Whole New World, we just saw Frank put 2 copies of that back into the deck in addition to a third card. Maybe not the matchup where he wants A Whole New World if his opponent is going to be able to take just as much advantage of it as he is.
All right, well, we are underway here for round number 2, and we'll see who's going to be on the play. Kurt was actually our LCQ winner from last night, and of the players in the LCQ, I have to say he was my favorite to win. His play was crisp, and his deck list looks very well thought out. So I have him pegged as one of the better players in the event today. Old school Magic grinder, and came all the way from the Northeast somewhere and just crushed everybody.
Yeah, Kurt's play was definitely impressive. Got a ton of value out of Grab Your Swords in every match we watched.
All right, here is turn 1 hook for both players. These are defensive measures against Simba Protective Cub, the 2-drop bodyguard from Amber that often comes down on 2 to give some buffer to your 1-drops. The hooks are likely going to stare at each other since they don't quest well, and they get knocked down by the opposing hook. Here's a looter. This 1-cost Simba is a newer addition to many of these Amber and Steel decks. It only has 1 strength, and that's its biggest downside for sure, but you're able to loot away some of those uninkables like the 5-drop hook, as well as Grab Your Sword or
Whole New World.
Whole New World.
Yeah, Whole New World is definitely the big one because what you want to do before playing that card is usually empty your hand as much as possible. But when two of the cards in your hand are a whole new world, you can't really do that. So finding ways to sneak in, these ways to filter through extra copies of Whole New World has led players towards Simba, Future King. And yeah, you mentioned, the game maybe tends to slow down a little bit when both players start with Captain Hook, kind of afraid
Right.
of letting your opponent get some free value off. So we're going to see some jockeying for position here until one player is able to get down and grab your sword.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like if you don't quest, you don't challenge, you don't do anything, eventually whoever plays grab your sword first is likely going to win.
Yeah.
Kurt did ink an aerial spectacular singer last turn. Usually that's a note that either you're low on ink or that you have an extra, and it looks like both are true for
Yes.
Kurt. Okay, gonna ink a Maximus is Frank. We have one copy of that in our deck as an extra big bodyguard. Frank is a big fan of ones. He's a math guy, and
Mhm.
math guys often figure out a bunch of holes to fill with one ofs, and he does that in Magic a lot, and he's doing it here in Lorcana as well. We ink our aerial. We drew another one, so we're gonna play that. And no, instead we're gonna shift onto Hook.
Wow. Yeah, let's get this card up on screen. Captain Hook thinking happy thoughts.
That wow, a very cheap and early grab your sword here from Kurt, and that's gonna off the shift of the Captain Hook thinking a happy thought is gonna knock off the Captain Hook from Frank Karsten. Maybe a little premature, but we know Kurt loves to empty his hand because he has a whole new world and he's trying to play that next turn, I think.
Exactly. Getting to sing consecutively 2 turns in a row is a great way to empty your hand for that whole new world. And this thinking happy thoughts, we haven't seen that third line of text come into play. Stolen Dust, characters with cost 3 or less can't challenge
Mhm.
Captain Hook. And even if Kurt didn't have access to the grab your sword, this would have been a great answer to the Hook and Prince Eric from Karsten.
Yeah, those early challenger characters can't challenge the Captain Hook thinking a happy thought. He's flying around. Can't
Way up
touch
in
him.
the air.
All right, we're going to play a couple of characters. Is Frank Karsten, Simba bodyguard, but not going to play in bodyguard mode. No quest from the Eric, and we're going to head back Kurt's way. And I have a feeling we're about to see a big wheel. We can, okay, so we can go ink, aerial, play a hook, wheel, look for a couple of other cheap things to play. Or we can play aerial and dig for a song. But Kurt here, we know, is extremely aggressive with the whole new worlds, and
Yeah.
he knows he's getting a full 7, whereas Frank is only getting 4. So we're going to go ahead and do it since we'll also have initiative on playing the characters with mostly full inkwell this turn.
Yeah, if Kurt had decided to, play out that aerial first, take a turn off, you can get yourself into trouble if your opponent's able to get as low as cards as you are. So any opportunity Kurt finds to kind of push ahead and then slam that whole new world, he's going to take it.
All right, Smash is going to knock off the Stitch New Dog. While it's the weakest character on the table, it is the shift target for Stitch Rockstar, which is a great play for Frank next turn. And taking that away from Frank is a nice way for Kurt to ensure that he has board dominance next turn. All right, Frank, going to go back his way. I see a Rapunzel. We can use that to heal to Eric. But neither character in play can challenge or quest too well. And we'll see if Frank wants to just deploy a couple more characters or if he wants to be a little interactive with some removal of his own.
Yeah, Frank is kind of, the early game didn't play out in the most optimal way for Frank. He's really looking to get on the ground fast with these aggressive characters. So now we're reaching the mid game, and Kurt's deck might have bigger tools and be able to more cleanly answer Frank's threats through this the middle of this game.
All right, Rapunzel going to give a few more cards. If you're Kurt, your plan is to wheel aggressively and as much as possible. When your opponent, after drawing 7, plays another thing that draws cards, that means that they're not really challenging you on the board. And here, Kurt's got to be pretty happy about that. Even though Rapunzel drawing cards is usually pretty good, when you already have 7, going up to 9 is like nothing.
Yeah. We've been through a few aerials already, but this would be a great spot for Kurt if he had another aerial to dig for another whole new world. Instead, I do think we're going to see this lantern come down. Kurt wants to make use of these cards as quickly as possible, and developing his resources is a road to that.
Yeah, and he does have a Carefree Surfer, which with the
Multiple.
Lantern means that he can play Carefree Surfer next turn. And Lantern is an integral part of Kurt's deck, but he's built it to utilize it well.
Yeah.
His deck is mostly characters, but more importantly, the Lantern helps with an early shift on Stitch Rockstar, but it also just helps enable these 4 copies of Carefree Server, which are a great late game tool. We're going to quest for 2, Kurt up to 3 lore, and now we're going to go back Frank's way. Chooses not to quest with the baby hook. I'm okay with that.
Frank is playing 1 copy of Lantern himself. Uh, that's there's a couple different routes you can take with Lantern. Frank has taken the light approach, doesn't want to draw too many, where Kurt is really integrating it into his game plan with a full 4 copies.
Yeah. All right. So Frank here with a lot of options can go ink plus grab your sword, and that wipes out everything except for the shifted hook. Then we can quest for 4. May want to deploy a character or 2 this turn, and then try to maybe sing that grab your sword later on. But usually that requires an aerial spectacular singer, which I don't see in his hand.
And this Captain Hook thinking happy thoughts, you know, Frank can't effectively challenge it with these lower costed characters, but it's also not especially threatening at this point. With only 1 lore, the reason these Amber Steel decks are turning to this Captain Hook is really for that explosive sing that we saw on turn 3 out of Kurt. Uh, this is the only way in Steel to pay 3 ink and immediately sing a 5 cost song. If you're in Sapphire, you do have access to Aurora, but this is kind of your only option in Amber Steel.
All right, Simba. A little Simba action. Battling each other, maybe. Saving the Prince Eric for later for something bigger, better. Yeah, once you exert the Simba, it's vulnerable to be challenged by the opposing Captain Hook. So I feel like that's what he was going for there. We're going to use Rapunzel to cycle 1 card and refresh that Simba, but not too bad if you're Kurt. I'd be pretty happy with that turn if I was him. And now Frank has the ability to go ink into a 1-drop if he so chooses, and I see a Lilo hanging out, but maybe that gets caught up in the grab your sword, so maybe you want to save that for later. Gonna go ahead and put it down and see, make Kurt have the answer. All right, we're gonna go back Kurt's way and see what he's got. A handful of pretty weak cards, if I do say so myself.
And you mentioned the Rapunzel in the previous turn, right after that whole new world, maybe not being the strongest play, drawing cards. We've now seen Frank has spent 9 ink over these past 2 turns and only gotten 3 strength out of the deal. So Frank is not really going to be able to effectively contest what Kurt has going on with pretty low strength out of most of his characters. And Kurt is perfectly happy with that after the whole new world. Frank isn't threatening a win anytime soon, and he's not threatening to interact very efficiently.
All right, here's Carefree Surfer. This is a nice slam dunk. Draw 2, big body. And now for Kurt, what do you want to do? We can do a lot of challenging here. I like Baby Hook goes into the Simba. I actually kind of like Big Hook goes into Simba and survives, and then Baby Hook goes into the Eric and survives. But I think that Kurt is just constantly aware of the threat of grab your sword and trying to make sure he has 3 or higher willpower on as many characters as possible. So good play on him on that part, I think. Sometimes the obvious challenge is not the right challenge because of cards like Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy, Grab Your Sword, Rapunzel.
Yeah, every point of damage and every point of willpower can end up mattering, especially with these steel decks. You get combinations of 2 Tinkerbells or a Tinkerbell and a Grab Your Sword. So these super efficient trades, like where you're sending a Simba into a Prince Eric, for example, sometimes ends up coming out in the wash if your opponent does have that Giant Fairy, something like that. We do see a Giant Fairy.
All right, that's going to deal 1 to the Hook, 1 to the Carefree Surfer, and 1 to the new dog, but it doesn't quite kill anything. Unfortunately for Frank, we still can't challenge the Hook because it does have that special ability, Stolen Pixie Dust. And if you're Frank, I'm not sure really what to do. Maybe just nothing, and then you sing Grab Your Sword next turn. Deciding.
Yeah, you kind of have to be happy with the Giant Fairy just sitting there as a threat for next turn. It might take a lot of resources for Kurt to deal with, and it's really going to slow down his ability to quest without getting punished. When I talked about Frank spending a lot of ink and only getting a few strength out of the deal, Tinkerbell Giant Fairy is kind of the answer to that. That's how you really start getting your board position back.
All right, Lula making a wish, gonna do what she does best and kiss goodbye.
Yeah.
Mm.
Got to get the lore while the getting's good. You know, Kurt's gonna have plenty of answers, incidental ones even to Alilo.
All right, we're gonna full quest here. It looks like for 3 more up to 8. Now we're gonna go back Kurt's way. The Tinkerbell Giant Fairy plus a grab your sword in hand is gonna threaten a full board clear next turn if Kurt decides to do some challenging or questing. We'll see how he wants to sequence, how he best can protect himself. Ooh, I saw a grab your sword of his own over there. Not that back-breaking form right now, but maybe in conjunction with some challenges or another damage effect could be quite strong.
Yeah, Kurt's very good at getting maximum value out of grab your sword, and instead we're gonna get maximum value out of Rapunzel.
Yeah, you hate to see that if you're Frank, but you know the moment you quest or challenge, that opens you up to your opponent's Rapunzel most of the time. So, you know, you gotta progress the game at some point. The Rapunzel is gonna get some value at some point as well. And now, hopefully for Frank, he's able to utilize the Tinkerbell Giant Fairy to pressure his opponent's stuff. Now, Kurt could just say, "I don't really want to challenge your stuff because that Tinkerbell Giant Fairy is quite scary."
Now, one of the virtues of the Rapunzel play from Kurt here is all the damage that was on the Captain Hook got wiped away, and now if Frank wants to challenge it with Giant Fairy, he's going to need some damage on it first before he's able to get the extra 2 damage out of Giant Fairy.
Mm-hmm.
So Kurt is, the best follow up here from Frank, I think, would be a second Giant Fairy, right? That sets up the hook to be able to be taken down by your first Giant Fairy, and
Allows you to kill the aerial as well.
exactly.
Yeah. All right, so Kurt gonna go ahead and play out a bunch of stuff to use all of his ink and plays Simba, Future King, and discards a whole new world. Has a ton of cards in hand, as do both players. That card is pretty weak in the aggro v aggro mirror. We saw Kurt utilize it nicely in the early turns, but that's basically the only time you're going to be able to cast it without it being potentially game ending from the other side. And you got to be kind of careful how you sequence. A pretty weak hand for Karsten. We see 3 copies of A Whole New World staring, and we'll see if he wants to grab your sword into some challenging here. Seems like the only real play.
Right. And it's going to be a pretty good grab your sword here, but things are still not looking great for Frank. Unlikely to be able to get much value at all out of these whole new worlds, and doesn't really have the filtering to be able to turn them into anything more effective with only 1 copy of Simba Future King.
I think you're seeing a deck construction advantage here from Kurt. Kurt has a ton of more inkables than normal, not playing the Lilo making wishes, instead using the Simbas, and the Simbas can let you loot away those extra mediocre dead ones, like the extra whole new worlds, or the weaker characters that you would draw later in the game. But here is grab your sword. That's going to do a lot of damage to the board and clear a couple things. Tinkerbell Giant Fairy is going to challenge the Captain Hook, finally getting off the table after it did so much damage. And the 2 damage from Giant Fairy also going to take out Ariel Spectacular Singer. Right, Karsten going to ink a Simba. And then play a Lantern. Here we go.
You mentioned Lilo not being inkable, and we did see Frank draw that Lilo in, what was it, turn 3 or 4 maybe, and just played it out. It got too lore, and then it got eaten up almost for free. Really a lot less effective on any turn of the game other than turn 1. And
I think it's pretty ineffective on turn 1 in a lot of the creature matchups as well. So Kurt actually removing it from his deck made a lot of sense, and we talked about that a bit during deck building, Frank Karsten and I, when we were just like driving up for the event. And the Lilos, you know, at the very least, maybe reducing the number in your deck seems right, but Kurt just foregoing them altogether, and you have to wonder, like, maybe that's just the future move.
yeah, coming back to the game here, the best possible card for Kurt there was another Rapunzel to be able to take some damage off the Stitch, take down the Giant Fairy, and develop a commanding board position.
Yeah, and now no board position for Frank, and he's likely out of it. Draws the fourth, whole new world. He can play it, but he's so far behind on board that he's just basically fallen into a hole.
A whole new different point of view. I don't remember the rest of the words.
Whether you're near or far, a shining star. Something like that.
Something like that.
All right, so Lantern here for Frank is allowing for a little bit of help for casting characters, but does not help for casting this whole new world. And this is the most desperate whole new world I've ever seen. Discards all 4 of them to draw 7. Let's see what we got. But not a lot of ink to work with after, and facing down a relatively large board from Kurt. We'll see if Frank's able to do anything to get back in this game. Maybe Aerial Spectacular Singer into double grab your sword next turn could be a way out. And I see an aerial in hand, so maybe that's the move.
Yeah, this is really the most effective way Frank's going to be able to set up a tempo swing on the following turn, like you said. But we haven't seen any copies of Smash out of Kurt yet, I don't think. And that's really what would close the door on this aerial if he's able to find a copy.
Okay, so going back Kurt's way. Commanding board position. A lot of cards in hand after that draw 7 and first to market. We're going to start with a Rapunzel, healing 3 on the Carefree Surfer. Carefree Surfer with Rapunzel, it has such a high willpower that it makes so much sense why Kurt's playing forward. He's built his deck around Lantern, and with a Carefree Surfer, Rapunzel, Rockstar, and a whole new world, he's able to always be flush with resources and able to use the extra ink from the Lanterns. And Rapunzel here with Carefree Surfer is just such a nice addition to the archetype. Most decks are playing like 2 Carefree Surfer, but I think the Lanterns ramping into it really changed the dynamic of the card. And I actually don't even really like it in the deck outside of when you're playing Max Lanterns.
We saw Kurt here with just an overabundance of resources after that whole new world.
Oh, one of those Rapunzels is sick. You can't quest. 1 second.
Yep. Oh, there it goes. They got it. But as I was saying, decided with all these extra resources in hand, Kurt played out the Stitch New Dog and then shifted onto it. Effectively only a 1 ink discount, but he was then able to play a Simba, draw a card, set up his board to be better protected, and doesn't really mind throwing that New Dog under the shift.
Okay, so we have Aerial Singer. I saw at least 1 grab your sword. Do we have 2? We do have 2. This might be a big board clear or close to it, although you probably still won't be able to clear everything. Those Rapunzels do have 5 willpower, but we're going to start with a Be Our Guest. I guess looking for a Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. Okay, finds
Just
Rockstar.
a Rockstar.
Spins 2. Another Be Our Guest.
Now, the interesting thing about this at this point is that Frank has tapped himself out of playing a Carefree Surfer on this turn, which I think would be a decent plan B if we're not going to be able to get down a Giant Fairy. But this first Grab Your Sword does come down. Get out the dice. Oh,
all right, not enough. And Frank going to pack it in. 2 Grab Your Sword wasn't going to be enough either, thanks to the Rapunzels and the Carefree Surfer, as well as the Rockstar. And game number 1 goes to our last chance qualifier winner, Kurt Spiess. And both these players here are on Amber Steel Stitch Blitz, but the unique and explosive take on the archetype from Kurt Spiess dominated our last chance qualifier last night. So far, he's 1-0 and up a game against Hall of Famer Frank Karsten. When I say Hall of Fame, I mean the Magic the Gathering Hall of Fame. Frank Karsten is no slouch when it comes to card games. He's been a member of the Pro Tour Hall of Fame for about a decade now. He has a PhD in math, probability theory, and game theory. And he writes for a lot of websites, including TCGplayer.com, our primary sponsor, Channel Fireball, Ultimate Guard, and Wizards of the Coast. He recently got a new job from Wizards of the Coast last year, and he's been basically the RCQ guy. Like, here's what's going on. Here's the regional championships. It's been really informative, really great stuff from him. We're glad to have him out to the event. And it was fun hanging out with him all week. His favorite Disney movie, The Lion King. Nice. Visited over 60 countries, and he hails from Eindhoven, Netherlands. His opponent is Kurt, who we don't have a graphic for because he was a last chance qualifier last night at midnight.
Yeah.
But Kurt is no stranger to competitive card games, and it looks like he is looking to not only dominate uh, Lorcana, but so he has a good history in Magic the Gathering as well. And multiple people who saw him enter the room last night for the
Yeah.
Last Chance qualifier said, "Oh, he's probably gonna win,"
Yeah.
and he did.
Even a few of our invitational qualifier players uh, kind of groaned. Oh, come on! I have to play
What are
against
you
Kurt.
doing here?
I have to play against Kurt too in this thing.
Yeah. All right. As these players are shuffling up here for game number 2, we're going to talk a little bit about our sponsors. First and foremost, I'd like to thank TCGplayer.com. They're our flagship sponsor for the event, and they're your one-stop shop for all things trading card game related, from Pokemon to Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, and now Disney's Lorcana. They're the marketplace for all singles, and check out TCG Player Infinite, their article side of things, if you want some strategy on how to get better at Disney's Lorcana. You can check out a couple articles that the Lost Boys posted on TCG Player Infinite earlier this week with a full list of the qualified players, their deck lists, as well as a metagame breakdown for what we were expecting for this event. The event itself is a little bit different than what we were expecting, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of Sapphire. Wasn't expecting a lot
Oh,
of
the
Sapphire.
metagame,
We just got
yes.
quite a bit. Also want to say thank you so much to Ultimate Guard for sponsoring the event. They have awesome products such as the Sidewinder deck box, Boulder deck box, Archive deck box. The Archive is the big baddie that helps contain your cubes and commander decks. And I'm a big fan of the Katana sleeves, and I know that's what Frank Karsten was using to sleeve up his deck this morning. And last but not least, thank you so much to Cards and Castles 2, the new Tactics card battler on Steam. It's free to play. It's currently in early access, and if you use code Apex Gaming, you get 5 free booster packs inside the client. It's a fun little card battler. The resource system's nice. You start at 1 gold. You generate 1 extra gold every single turn. You draw a card from your deck every turn, and those cards do awesome things inside the game engine. And the Tactics Battlefield allows for some really robust and deep gameplay. We'll be posting some videos later on of me demoing the game if you're interested in seeing how it plays. Now, the players are here and ready for game number 2, so let's head on down and watch and see if Frank can come back. He's down a game, starting off with Captain Hook.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to Frank a little yesterday about his deck selection, and he mentioned, lover of aggro. Recently, of course, has been playing a lot of Boros Convoke and Magic. So he decided he wanted to play aggro and zeroed in on the Lilo into Simba curve, and then looked for the best color to supplement that, and decided he was a fan of Steel because it kind of lets you add a second deck into your aggro deck and play 2 powerful game plans. But we haven't seen those Lilo starts from him in either of these first 2 games.
Yeah, he had the Lilo last game, but it was kind of late and rather ineffective. He was on the back foot early thanks to Kurt's Whole New World that was played on, I think, turn 4.
Mm.
And it was pretty backbreaking, all things considered. Turn 2 Lantern from Kurt, that's a great one here because the Captain Hook can challenge the Simba. Neither character on the other side is wanting to quest, and Frank here going to just say go a bunch. We're going to look at the top 4 with Ariel, and we're going to put him on the bottom. Big miss. That happens a lot, but Singer 5 on the Ariel makes it still one of the strongest cards in the game, if not the strongest card in the game. Being able to sing a Whole New World ahead of schedule is ridiculous in these aggro decks where you can empty your hand, but being able to play Grab Your Sword for super cheap is also quite strong in the other side of the coin, the aggressive matchups.
Yeah, both Grab Your Sword and A Whole New World, one of the keys to maximizing those cards is timing them correctly. And that includes being able to play them earlier if that's the perfect spot, which is why you see plays like what Kurt just made. Just trade a smash for that aerial, get it off the field. We don't want Frank to have any good opportunities to sing.
All right, Frank going to play another Lantern on his side of things. Still no questing. Doesn't want to trade Simba for Captain Hook. Instead, hoping to use Grab Your Sword to sweep up the hook, so no value. But the same can be said for Kurt. So it's just a weird waiting game where the first person to play Grab Your Sword usually gets a commanding position. Here's a Simba, Future King. We're going to loot 1. See what Kurt wants to discard. And is 2 Tinkerbell, Tactician. He's only playing 2. A lot of the Steel list like to curve Tactician into the giant fairy in the 3/4 slot. But Kurt less interested in that and more so focused on natural curving using Lantern for ramping. But the Tinkerbell Tactician still an integral part of the steel package.
And part of the reason Kurt is a little more comfortable trimming down on those tiny tacticians is that he has a second, or rather third shift package with these captain hooks, meaning he has a few more outs to be able to sing ahead of schedule, so he doesn't need to rely on tiny tactician as often.
All right, so we're in the squeeze here as Kurt. If you hold your hand, you lose to a whole new world. If you play your hand, you lose to grab your sword. And unfortunately for Kurt, I believe Frank has both. And I think he drew ink number 5 for the turn. So once he plays that ink number 5, he'll be able to sweep 3 of the characters off the opposing side of the board. Maybe wants to get a little greedy and wait a little while before he does it. I saw he drew Stitch Rockstar for the turn, I think, and inking that one is kind of meh, but it is what it is. Very low on resources here is Frank Karsten.
Yeah, Kurt also pretty low. Even Carefree Surfer, you're getting to the point in the game where you're interested in playing that, but Kurt's not quite gonna have enough ink for a couple turns now, and this maybe if he draws an inkable off the top, this Stitch Rockstar could come down and threaten to start drawing more cards off the top.
Oh, no, it's Arrow Singer. We're going to go ahead and do that. Top 3, top 4. We found a Grab Your Sword. Probably going to take that. No, we're going to take Be Our Guest as ink, okay? And we can play that, look at the top 4, and look for a character, or we can just play it into the Inkwell. See what he wants to do. I would just play it into the Inkwell personally. And that's what he's going to do too. All right, going back to Kurt's Weight. Let's see if he has another answer for the Aerial Spectacular Singer. Doesn't look like it, but does have a Stitch Rockstar, which he can shift with no follow-up, but can get it onto the table, which means it's going to be pretty scary next turn.
Yeah, this is an awkward turn for Lantern. If that was an inkable card, Kurt would just be able to play out the Rockstar and have this new dog still sitting around as an extra character. But instead, if he's going to play his cards, it has to be in this way.
All right. Kurt knows that he's about to get whooped by a Grab Your Sword, so he's going to go questing with the Simba, find to throw it away for the lore. And now Frank, we're going to go back his way. Doesn't actually have to play a whole new world. Hands are almost empty for both players, and it looks like he's going to be somewhat ahead on board once he sings Grab Your Sword. We'll see how he wants to sequence this turn. I don't think playing a whole new world is going to be right for him because his opponent seems to have a small board advantage and a small resource advantage.
Yeah, this, especially if you whole new world here, Kurt is almost guaranteed to just get a ton of value out of this Rockstar and just flood the board. At which point, Frank is really only looking for a second Grab Your Sword, but decides to play neither card this turn.
Well, I think by playing neither, he's saying, okay, well, you're going to have a big Stitch Rockstar turn, and my best follow-up is a Grab Your Sword for that. So we're just going to chill. Here comes Simba Bodyguard. It's going to draw a card. And we do draw Grab Your Sword, but it only kills Frank Karsten's hook. So maybe not the best use for it here. Kurt might want to loot, but he might want to hold on to it as well.
You know what's going to break this game wide open is the first player to draw a Rapunzel, I think. You're going to be able to set up a situation, especially once Kurt starts questing. Both players are going to start questing and challenging, and whoever draws Rapunzel is going to pull way ahead, I think.
Well, Kurt still thinks there's a Grab Your Sword over there, willing to just quest with these small dorks that are likely going to get swept up in the muck. And we'll see if Frank wants to go a challenging or if he wants to sing any of the songs in hand and how he wants to play the rest of his turn. We both have Stitch Rockstar active, so a slew of 1 and 2 cost characters means they each replace themselves, but both players have Grab Your Sword, which can take care of most of them next turn.
Yeah, looks like Frank maybe gonna start with a sing. Though I wouldn't be surprised to see him start with a Captain Hook instead. If you're gonna draw cards during your turn, it's usually better to do that first. Here's the Grab Your Sword.
Are we wheeling? Okay, so Frank says, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and sing A Whole New World. I have a dominant board presence here. We're going to play the hook as an ink, and then we are going to sing A Whole New World with Stitch Rockstar. And now we get to play a bunch of follow-ups here. And if Kurt wasn't able to draw Tinkerbell or Grab Your Sword off the top 7 or 8 cards, then Frank Karsten might be in a dominant position here. Let's see what he's got. I see a handful of hooks. I see a Rapunzel that doesn't do anything at the moment, but could be great next turn.
The Rapunzel can do something thanks to that Simba.
Ah,
We can draw a couple cards and shrink Kurt's board a little. And one of the advantages as we get into this longer, back and forth trading game, Kurt is playing 4 copies of Carefree Surfer where Frank only has 2. And that 8 willpower is really key in these steel matchups. So if Kurt can start slamming those characters, keeping his hand size up, I think he has the advantage as the game goes long.
all right, Frank here. Both players with a grip full, but Frank going to go ahead and play Rapunzel and heal 2 on the Simba and draw 2. And then still has the ability to play 2 or 3 cheap characters and draw cards off the Stitch Rockstar. We'll see what he wants to deploy. All of them replace themselves, so if you get swept, it's not a huge deal, but has to keep that in the back of his mind at all times, basically.
Another thing to keep in the back of his mind, the most explosive turn for Kurt here could even involve shifting Tinkerbell onto this tiny Tinkerbell. So once you start turning your characters sideways, there's not a whole lot you can do to avoid that, unless of course Frank can find an answer to the Tinkerbell. But Kurt is gonna have his pick as far as challenging with the giant fairy if he found one off that whole new world.
Okay, Frank, just shoving all in. We're going to play a bunch of cheap characters here and quests, and we're going to go back Kurt's way after that big explosive turn. That was the same turn when we cast Grab Your Sword. So it was Grab Your Sword, Wheel, Rapunzel, 1, 2, 3, 4 characters after that, and so many cards drawn for Frank and Kurt now in a bad way. Slightly behind on board, and needs Grab Your Sword or Big Tink here to catch back up. I see the Big Tink. It allows the tactician in hand to maybe eat the Simba with the shift, but this feels so bad.
Yeah, this is a pretty good Simba here. Without Simba, the Tinkerbell would be looking to trade off for the Rockstar after that 1 damage is applied to it. But Simba really makes things awkward, especially as most Amber Steel decks at this point are playing 0 copies of Fire the Cannons, which some players on different steel combinations have turned to as a way to kind of efficiently get their board position back after a whole new world.
Right.
But neither player has access to that card.
In the Steel Amber decks specifically, I think Nicholas Rausch and Don Delosier are both playing a couple copies of that Fire the Cannons, and I know that Young Dingo is playing 4 copies of Fire the Cannons, but
Right.
he's playing Steel Amethyst mid.
Exactly.
All right, Kurt, what you got? Big Tink shift. It's probably the best you got so far because he doesn't quite have access to grab your sword here.
Yeah. And maybe maybe a couple awkward copies of Whole New World in Kurt's hand as well.
It do be like that.
Do be like that. Working things out, the best you can really do, I guess the Stitch Rockstar could take down the Simba if you really wanted to get at your opponent's Rockstar with Tank.
Okay, looks like we're not. We're just going to go challenge the Simba to keep the Tinkerbell alive for a turn. Get out the dice! Get out the dice!
Yeah. Gotta get into the black dice.
Yeah, that's going to be the first Lost Boys t-shirt is Get Out the Dice. And it's going to be a Tinkerbell giant fairy screaming it into the broken ship that she's holding. It's going to be awesome. I love it. All right, well, Kurt here. Going to do a lot of thinking, but challenges the Simba, and that allows him to deal some extra damage to the Rockstar, smash finishes off the Rockstar. We can sing A Whole New World or we can challenge something, and I'm curious what he wants to do. And he's really in the tank on it because singing A Whole New World is obviously dangerous, but his hand is pretty weak. And Frank has a dominating board.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy to sing Whole New World here. I think you're they're going to be taking up the space in your hand for the rest of the game if you don't play it this turn, I think. And Kurt kind of needs to find another tank or another grab your sword, but decides to hold on to them.
All right, back Frank Carson's way. Grip full. Looks like a really good turn coming for him. And he's already ahead, so this might shut the door on Kurt for game number 2 and force game 3. We'll see what he wants to do.
If only he was playing Hakuna Matata.
Yeah, we could heal them all up. You know, after rewatching The Lion King, I had a revelation.
What's that?
Hakuna Matata is toxic, man.
Really?
Yeah, means you don't got to care about anything, right? Socially, whatever, right?
You know,
If you listen to the lyrics,
it's only toxic if you accept it in a toxic way, I think.
look, Nala knew it was toxic. Nala came over to Simba and was like, "What are you talking about, bro? You're king. Come on home. Be king." What's this Hakuna Matata nonsense?
Yeah, Hakuna Matata is great until you have actual responsibilities, I
Right,
guess.
exactly. When all you do is eat grub worms and lay
Yeah.
around all day like a warthog. All right, well, Karsten here. Sequencing the turn, I'm assuming once he figures out the line, it'll be a bit faster. We do have, it looks like another grab your sword. No. Different kind of sword. It's Aladdin with a sword. Here's a Carefree Surfer, going to draw 2. Now after Kurt, that is going to make casting the Whole New World a much easier proposition next turn. And now Frank can challenge the Tinkerbell Big Fairy and then quest a bunch. But that's basically all she wrote. Turn's about over here.
I do like this play from Karsten, though. Any more Rockstar plays, there's no more Rockstar. Uh, any more development with, multiple cards instead of this one big Carefree Surfer just puts you in that much worse shape against Grab Your Sword or Tank. And Frank decides, I'm wide enough. Let me go a little bit tall, get this high willpower character down.
All right, a big lore turn there for Frank as well. Gains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I believe up to 7 total now. And Kurt here going to lead off with Simba. We're going to loot and draw.
Wow. So Kurt decided, I'm going to make use of these Simbas to get through these whole new worlds, but one of those Simbas drew another copy of Whole New World. Not quite out of it yet.
Yeah. Well, we can sing Whole New World here. Look for Grab Your Sword, which can deal with both hooks, the Lilo, and the Mermaid on the other side of things.
And this should be a pretty good Whole New World, I think, because Tinkerbell Giant Fairy also does it, right? It takes care of at least the hooks and the small Simba, which is kind of the next best thing, and would even give you enough damage on Rapunzel to be able to take it down with Stitch. But Kurt may be still afraid of what Frank could do with a fresh hand. So many cards, though. You'd think you would really want to start off with a Whole New World for Kurt.
We're going to Hakuna Matata. Maybe just saying, I might be able to beat your hand as is. Playing a Whole New World, probably not the way to go. And we have a bunch of card draw with the Rockstar going. Looks at the top 4, finds another Aerial, Carefree Surfer.
And this, Be Our Guest here, singing with a Stitch, it kind of removes some outs for at least this turn. You do get this Aerial, but you're not going to be able to play a Grab Your Sword if you find it. What Kurt was really looking for was a Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, but he missed. A couple copies of Aerial now. That can be a pretty threatening turn here for Kurt, maybe, if he gets one or both of these Aerials down. Threatening to really respond to Frank's turn, but it's going to be, a turn later, and Frank's going to be able to do a lot of damage on the scoreboard in the meantime.
All right. Kurt in the tank. We're going to go Stitch New Dog, draw a card. We have a Rapunzel, which we can use to heal. I believe we drew a Simba Bodyguard we can play to draw another card. Ariel can look for some more songs. The lore is still wrong. Can we get a check on our spotter here? Because I know that we have at least 7, maybe 8 lore on Frank's side of things, and it's been wrong for about 5 minutes now.
There's a decent Rapunzel. It's going to make it a little harder for Frank to answer the Stitch, but I think Frank might be far enough ahead at this point that he's less concerned with that. LeFou hits the Inkwell.
Okay, as these players are jockeying for position, we will get graphics updated here in just a second. It looks like we do have that. Thank you so much, Mr. Director, sir. All right, now we're going to go back Frank's way. Let's see if he can figure out a way to close it out. Neither player is that close to 20 lore, but we have large boards for both players. A lot of potential combat to be had, and a lot of potential sweeping to be had with Grab Your Sword and Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. Let's see how Frank wants to navigate this turn.
I wouldn't be super surprised to see these Captain Hooks trade off for something, right? They can double trade into the Stitch, or even just sending them into the Simbas is a better use against a Tinkerbell. But this is a great find right off the bat for Frank. It's Grab Your Sword.
Yeah, and that's going to deal 2 to a bunch of stuff, killing 3 characters and leaving damage on the Rockstar. And unless Kurt has the same thing next turn plus something else, Frank is going to be in a commanding position here. Already has board dominance, lore dominance, hand dominance, and we'll see if he can essentially completely lock Kurt out of the game with a couple more characters that are invulnerable to those big damage effects. All right, we're going to quest for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, we just played that one. Excuse me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 14.
Pretty good. And it's going to take multiple cards to take down this Rapunzel. Far too many to take down the Carefree Surfer. Frank is threatening a win very shortly here, especially with yet another threat.
All right, just going to play a Rockstar using all the extra ink that we have available. Now back Kurt's way. Needs to start off with Aerial Singer. Needs Grab Your Sword. Pronto. Doesn't find it. Let's be our guest. We can ink that. If we play another Aerial, we can sing. Oh, we can't sing because our Stitch is dead. I think the game's over.
I agree. Frank was able to even get one of his hooks off the table. There we go.
All right. Well, game number 2 goes to Frank Karsten, a dominating board from the get-go, and Kurt unable to keep up. The game 1 and 2 both decided by the player who first casts A Whole New World, and in both situations it was a singing it plus a bunch of characters to essentially solidify my board advantage, and then riding that to victory over the rest of the game, even if the opposing character is able to deploy stuff, unable to deploy stuff that keeps up because you're just on the back foot after the draw 7. It's just how it goes.
Yeah, Kurt had, some outs there in the middle after that Whole New Worlds plus Rockstar turn from Frank, but was only able to find 1 Giant Fairy and was never able to find a Grab Your Sword. So Frank was able to leverage that one super explosive turn and close out the game just a couple turns later.
All right, players are shuffling up here for game number 2. Just want to say thank you so much to everyone who's in Twitch chat and YouTube chat, enjoying our primary, or not our first Lorcana event, but our main Lorcana event. This is the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational, brought to you by TCGplayer.com. We are in round number 2. The players we're watching on your left: Frank Karsten, Magic the Gathering Hall of Famer. On your right, Kurt Spiess, no slouch either. Played on the SCG Tour for quite a long time during the 20-teens and is doing well as our last chance qualifier champion last night, and is looking to make a name for himself perhaps in Disney's Lorcana. We recently started the Lost Boys channel, the Lost Boys LOR on everywhere, YouTube, Patreon, Twitter. That's Matt Courier, myself, Harlan Fear, and a couple other folks from Roanoke, Virginia, all looking to make some awesome Lorcana content for you, and we are putting on this event for you as well in conjunction with Apex Gaming out of Caldwell, Ohio. And we thank you so much for tuning in, and we appreciate you being here. We are about to start game number 3. Kurt Spiess will be on the play since he lost game number 2. These are untimed rounds. Players here will have no draws. We're in pod play for day number 1. We're racing to 3 wins. If you get 3 wins, you're into day number 2. If you get 3 losses, you're out. If you get 3 losses before there are 3 wins. The first pod is just 8-person. You try to 3-0. We have 2 pods, and both these players are 1-0, looking to make it to the finals of that first pod and lock up their seat to day number 2. As these players are taking a mulligan here, Matt, why don't you give me some of your extra analysis? What are they looking for to start with? What kind of cards are they going to be throwing back and mulliganing?
Well, in general for Frank, he mentioned that Lilo Simba start hasn't seen that either of these games. I wouldn't be just surprised if he has decided that this is not really the matchup for that, right?
Right.
That this is more about jockeying for position, getting some great value, whole new worlds. Just maybe even if you have Lilo plus Simba, at some point that Lilo's gonna get taken down for free. So Frank's not gonna be able to rely on an aggressive start, and instead wants to set himself up with a good early curve of value. We've seen a lot of turn 1 Captain Hook forceful duelists. I wouldn't be surprised if both of these players are valuing that start very highly.
Yeah, it's a great check for turn 2 Simba Bodyguard. It challenges many of the 1-strength characters from the other side without dying. Doesn't quest very well, but I think in this matchup, questing is kind of in the back of your mind.
Absolutely.
More so, you just want to make sure you have perfect board position. Make sure that you are sequencing well and setting up for future turns. Game 3 underway. Kurt leads off with a Stitch New Dog to set up a potential shifted Rockstar later. Maybe going to quest some, but maybe just leaves it sitting there,
Yeah, now I did catch right off the top there for Frank. We did see Lilo making a wish, that he instantly tucked behind the Stitch New Dog. So now he has the choice whether to contest the Stitch or maybe threaten an aggressive start.
All right, we're going to ink the new dog and play the hook so that we can challenge a potential Simba. But if Stitch wants to quest, we can trade with that as well if there's no defender in the way. All right, here's just a cast Be Our Guest from Kurt. Not where you want to be on turn number 2 usually, but these games seem like they go longer, and cards like Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, Stitch Rockstar are pretty important. We're going to go for the Tiny Tactician, though, so we have a nice little curve on turn 3. And my guess is no quest because the body on Stitch New Dog means shift Rockstar later on, and Kurt agrees.
And I really think it says something that even on turn 1, Frank decided not to even play the Lilo. That's, if you're ever going to play it, it seems like it would be on turn 1, but Frank just decides fighting for board position is going to be way more important. Maybe the Lilo's going to get to sneak in there and get 2 lore later in the game and dodge a Tinkerbell for 1 turn, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see Frank maybe here we go.
Okay, so we go turn 2 Lantern and use the Lantern to play that Lilo Making a Wish, which you said. We're going to go back Kurt's way. Lantern on the play, quite strong and oftentimes hard to beat. Lantern on the draw, still very good, although it basically just puts you at parity with your opponent in terms of resource development. Here is a 3-cost play. That's a Tinkerbell we found last turn, and no quest once again back Frank Karsten's way.
There's the second Lilo. Now, if I'm in Frank's position, I consider kind of making a gamble. If we get to quest multiple times with a couple Lilos before Kurt is able to find a sweeper, that could put us in a position to kind of turn the tide and threaten a win through lore rather than board position. But Frank instead decides, I'm not going to throw both of these Lilos into the same meat grinder. Save one for after the other dies.
Yep. At this point, if you're trying to make analogies to Magic the Gathering here, the Lilo kind of represents Lava Spike. It's basically doesn't challenge in combat at all, and it just represents a bit of lore generation. And in this matchup specifically, it's very hard to protect, and it doesn't challenge. And overall, it's just not ideal in your opener. But as we know, Kurt Spiess has cut them from his deck entirely, even though it's one of the stronger cards against an perhaps underprepared Ruby Amethyst pilot without a lot of cheap interaction.
Exactly. And speaking of the Ruby Amethyst matchup, we did see Kurt was able to take down Ruby Amethyst last night in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's pretty confident in that matchup. I wonder if we'll get to see him play against maybe Nathan or Matt Campo.
All right, Tiny Tactician goes a Luton. Frank going to be discarding here. Still has the ability to play ink number 4, and that way the Lantern allows for 5 drop like Maximus, perhaps even Stitch New Dog plus a shift. See how Frank wants to sequence. We're going to discard the backup Lilo, it looks like, because of how weak the body is and how inconsequential questing is early on in this matchup specifically. And we're going to play Aerial, looking for Grab Your Sword or something similar, but has a whole new world in hand that we can use to sing next turn if we're able to get on empty. And he finds another whole new world, but may choose not to show it so that Kurt doesn't know about it and perhaps doesn't play around it. You know, maybe holds more cards in hand. We all know the second whole new world is relatively dead because the first one makes you discard the second one.
Yeah, and Frank does have the opportunity, maybe next turn, to be able to loot the second whole new world away with a Tinkerbell, but instead decides the cards in hand before the whole new world might not matter that much. The plan is to get down to empty right away and then cast it.
All right, Kurt here. Resource disadvantage. Lantern on Frank's side of things. Two Tiny Tacticians are not able to rumble too well and aren't that threatening, but here Kurt gonna ink smash and might play Simba, but might just smash the aerial to prevent a big song turn next turn. No, we're gonna shift onto the Stitch Rockstar. Are we gonna loot with the Tinkerbells, looking for a 1-drop to play, or perhaps a song to play, like a Grab Your Sword?
If we are looting, I think Kurt rushed here a little. You usually want to draw your cards before making any other decisions, and Kurt kind of in an awkward position now, but maybe is prioritizing trading off for this Tinkerbell instead.
Yeah, I don't hate it, but it does open you up pretty hardcore to an opponent's Grab Your Sword. But I think Grab Your Sword is just key in this matchup no matter what and no matter when. And if your opponent plays it and kills 2 things that are already damaged, not so big of a deal. And plus, we know Frank doesn't have it. So he has a whole new world, which he can play this turn off the Aerial Spectacular Singer after playing some of these characters out of hand. Let's see if that's the play he wants to make.
And I'm sure Kurt considered smashing this aerial instead of shifting the Stitch Rockstar, but since he didn't do that, it appears he's uh, really trying to get that Stitch out of his hand. Boom.
Yeah, and I think getting the Rockstar into play before your opponent plays a whole new world is important, and it's one way for him to potentially keep up. We'll see if Karsten has a way to clear the Rockstar. Maybe he draws a smash plus, I don't know. It's very difficult to get it off the table in this matchup when it's not exerted.
Yeah. Tinkerbell Giant Fairy on top, not quite enough to clear the other Tinks. And now this aerial for Frank is exposed, of course. A Tinkerbell Giant Fairy from Kurt's side would be pretty threatening, especially as a shift. Looking like at least one copy of Whole New World in Kurt's hand. Going to be pretty difficult to develop that. And here's a threat from Frank, this Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, and a couple trades. So Frank, I like this play from Frank, getting rid of both of the 1-drops before Grab Your Sword or Giant Tinkerbell can come down, and in exchange, you get to ward off any Giant Tinkerbells from Kurt.
All right, looks like we have some updates from our backup matches here. We have the Hug Brothers were battling off camera in the 0-1 bracket. Taryn beat Kyle, the superior Huck brother.
Yeah,
comes
he's
out
gonna
on top.
hold that one over Kyle for a while, probably.
Brendan DeCandio defeated Tron is Bad. That means Tron is Bad moves to 0-2, and we'll have an elimination match next round. Brendan now 1-1. Campo won his match over Zach Powers in the mirror match. That finished quickly, actually. Ruby Amethyst Mirror, yeah. We also have the results. Nathan Stoyer beat Nick Rouse, excuse me. And Mason Clark beat Young Dingo. And then Krista O beat Dawn Delosier. So those are our updates for our other matches.
All right, getting back into this match, the best Kurt could do after that Whole New World was Deploy a second Stitch Rockstar and pass.
Not great.
Not ideal.
Well, looks like both players are kind of in a weird spot, though. Neither player feels comfortable questing. That's one thing that's a little awkward about the combat system. You can only challenge stuff when you're exerted, right?
Hmm.
And so that creates these weird incentives to not quest and to not activate abilities and to basically leave your characters ready at all times. And that elongates games, creates positions where players just kind of look at each other. And so your goal at that point is to present a threat and use it that is so scary that your opponent is essentially forced to interact with you.
Right.
And that's kind of where we're at in this game.
Rockstar of his own for Frank, combining that with the third Lilo to draw a card, and now is looking at one copy of Grab Your Sword and hoping to hold off, especially into these Rockstars. You can be pretty happy to find yourself with a Grab Your Sword in hand, but I don't know if Kurt has any characters to play to draw cards off these Rockstars. So it's just going to be a Stitch Carefree Surfer, draw a couple cards, and pass back, not doing anything with these Rockstars. It's Kurt.
Okay, no sing, no draw. Karsten, what you got? We're in a bit of a holding pattern here.
Yeah.
All right, but now the Rockstar is going to create some spots for Kurt to potentially trade, and that's going to essentially open up the game where both players have to start interacting now. Prince Eric comes down, going to draw a card, and I assume that Frank's going to continuously play a couple more characters that do the same. If he has them. He might not have them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see either of these Tinkerbells come down for Frank. That's, he's inducing action from Kurt, like you said, with these exerted characters, but Tinkerbell Giant Fairy is great at capitalizing on that, and especially if he can get down or threaten to get down a second copy, that'll make any action from Kurt pretty punishable. Yep.
All right, here's Giant Fairy. He's going to deal 1 to opposing characters. And that, with the 2 challenges, is just such a powerful threat next turn. And I wouldn't be surprised to see if Kurt just, like, not quest, not challenge, because these Giant Fairies are just so terrifying.
Yeah, so with that being said, Kurt's going to kind of need to answer these cheap characters in a different way if he doesn't want to expose himself to Tinkerbell. So we might actually get to see Lilo put in some work in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. All right, we can sing Be Our Guest if we want to with Ariel, and I think that's what Frank is considering. The Ariel does have a lot of value, though, and singing just to Be Our Guest instead of Grab Your Sword or Potential Whole New World on the following turn perhaps puts him in a spot where he's not very happy. Now, Kurt has a pretty gummed up hand, even after a draw 7 and a bunch of Carefree Surfer draws, as well as those Stitch Rockstars being active for so long. But his hand looks like a bunch of lanterns and whole new worlds and Rapunzels. It's like, okay.
Rapunzel, pretty good here, at least, now that 2 damage has accumulated on this first Rockstar.
This could be a monumental turn for Spiess. He has so many songs and ways to sing them. A Grab Your Sword and a Whole New World, both at his fingertips. Well, literally, I guess.
And Grab Your Sword, well, it only takes down 1 character by itself. The damage accumulating will make it harder for Frank to get consistent value out of these giant fairies. Any challenges they do will leave them banished.
Matt, are you familiar with the chess turn of simplification or simplifying the board?
No.
So, oftentimes in chess, players will trade pieces because it makes decisions easier.
Mm.
And if you are ahead, you would like to complexify to increase complicate to increase the complexity of the board.
Yeah.
But if you're behind, you want to simplify. Right.
Okay.
And so at this point, Frank here, since he's in the driver's seat, he just wants to essentially wait for Kurt to do anything while continuously presenting more and more pressure. Whereas Kurt is essentially forced to try to find a way to simplify things because the longer the game goes, Frank can just amplify his advantage. Kurt here gonna go for a grab your sword singing, deals 2 to everything, casts a whole new world off another song, finds another grab your sword. This could be the turn he needed. That setup now with the Tinkerbell gonna pay off in spades. Here's one more damage everything. Bring out the dice.
Nope.
Grab your sword. Everything's dead.
Put
Get
the
them
dice
out.
Put
Get
the
the
dice away.
brooms. It's a clean sweep. Curse Beast takes them all down.
Yeah, you were exactly right when you pointed out how much singing Kurt was going to be able to do. That was, what, 15, 21, 22, 23 ink worth of cards Kurt was able to play. And it led to a massive swing. 5 damage to everything when all was said and done.
I'm a big Frank Karsten fan.
Yeah.
That was hard to watch.
Yeah.
I was watching a car crash in slow
For
motion.
sure.
Well done to Kurt for setting that up over multiple turns. Obviously found the second copy of Grab Your Sword off of the whole new world, but setting up a big board of things that can sing, and finds a spot on a stalemated board for Frank. And now he's in the driver's seat, and it's up to Frank to essentially do the same thing back to Kurt that Kurt just did. But starting from an empty board is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned, this matchup not really about questing. Scoreboard still looks at 2-0, but it's gonna take Kurt just a couple turns to quest for victory once he's gotten into such a commanding position.
Right. He has 12 lore on the table, and so if Frank doesn't present anything that's like that challenging or that able to challenge, then we can just quest for 12, play some more stuff, and then next turn quest for 8 and win the game. All right, 1 to everything.
Okay.
Yep.
Get out the dice.
Get out the dice. That's not as fun as when you're sweeping everything. Get out the dice. God, we needed some like hardcore rock music to come on when we did that. That was sick. That's got to be the play of the day so far. That turn from Kurt.
For sure.
We'll see if anyone can top it. We'll see if Frank can come back. We have an Aladdin, Swordsman, and Stitch New Dog to go along with the Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. I'm going to go back Kurt's way and see if we can potentially close this game out before Kurt's able to get back in it. Tinkerbell Giant Fairy can be a little scary, especially in conjunction with a Grab Your Sword. I mean, we saw the damage that Kurt was able to do last turn with that exact combination of things.
Yeah, especially with this Rapunzel, I think Kurt is probably just still going to be safe enough to quest with these characters. You know, Tinkerbell's going to put in work, but I don't know that it'll be enough work.
Right. And it looks like Kurt actually has another Grab Your Sword too, so it can clean up the New Dog and the Aladdin on the other side of the table in conjunction with some of these other plays from hand, more characters to quest.
Yeah, and a priority I think for Kurt here is going to be willpower.
Right.
We see that Captain Hook thinking happy thoughts at the front. Any characters he can play that are less vulnerable to the best possible plays from Frank are going to put him in the best position.
All right, we're going to do some questing here, more than likely, if you're Kurt. Think the worst case scenario ain't that bad.
Exactly.
Perhaps can use Carefree Surfer to sing since it quests for the lowest lore here among the stitches. Or the big stitches, I guess. There's so many stitches.
Yeah, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches in play. And a 7th tucked under that rock star.
Yeah. It's
You
cool
know,
that, I mean, I love Stitch as a character. He's very cool. And the fact that they made the goon for Amber be the Stitch and the shift of the Rockstar onto it means that it's by far the most powerful goon of the bunch too. So Stitch kind of shown off at all metrics. The 1-drop, the 6-drop, and the 7.
Yeah, just you wait until we get 10 ink Sergeant Tibbs.
All right, we're gonna go question. Are we going to do anything else? Sing this Grab Your Sword, perhaps. Play Captain Hook, thinking happy thoughts, maybe.
I like it.
Okay, doesn't sing Grab Your Sword. Gonna allow those other characters on the other side to come on in, trade. I'm curious why he didn't do anything with that other Stitch Rockstar. Perhaps.
Or the Tinkerbell.
Right. perhaps just valuing them as, you know, creating like a tower defense board, right? Like you're
Mm,
putting these characters on the table, your opponent can't remove them, and if they ever challenge you, they lose, right?
right.
And so these are just preventative measures, punishments, for playing the game. And if you quest with them, oftentimes you just leave them potentially vulnerable to being challenged or uh, whatnot.
Yeah, so Kurt playing a turn or two in advance here decides with that Tinkerbell, I can't quite handle it on this turn, meaning it's going to be able to get some value and maybe delay my win by a couple turns. So I'm going to set up my own board to be able to respond to that. So definitely keeping back the Giant Fairy makes a lot of sense, and then is still interested in holding back the Rock Star as well. And Captain Hook thinking happy thoughts here. Not only is it going to be hard for Frank to remove, the Challenger ability means it's going to be pretty good at responding to anything that Frank leaves vulnerable.
All right, so Frank plays Carefree Surfer, gonna draw two, and now we're gonna move into the stage of the turn where we start challenging and clearing the board as best as we can. We're gonna go two into the Carefree Surfer, and then Tinkerbell's gonna go into Carefree
Mm-hmm.
Surfer. That's gonna deal. Oh, excuse me. So gonna go into the stage Rockstar, deal two to the Carefree Surfer, and then the Aladdin's gonna finish that off. I think that Kurt would have been in a much better position here if he had just sang "Grab Your Sword" last turn with the Rockstar or the
Right.
Tink, and then quested with the other one. And now though, Karsten able to clear a couple of those characters, including the Carefree Surfer, and we'll see if Kurt's able to solidify his board position. But you have to start trying to push towards the end of the game.
Absolutely. You've gone through a bunch of your most effective cards now. This is going to be a pretty good grab your sword when it comes down. Should be free to draw a couple cards first, I suppose. Yeah, two grab your sword that Kurt has access to.
All right, we're in round number two of the Lost Boys Invitational, brought to you by TCGPlayer.com. We are in game number three of our second round of pod play. Both these players are 1-0, and we're in game number three. Both these players are playing Amber, Steel, Stitch, Blitz, and we are in a tight one. Kurt had an unbelievable turn 2 turns ago, and now going to continue his dominance, playing another Grab Your Sword, playing full retail here. Comes a lantern.
I think we just have to sing this. Do you think we play the second grab your sword here? You're losing a quest to do it, but I think getting that aerial off the battlefield is going to deny Frank some singing. But Kurt just decides to quest for the max.
Yeah, Quest Max is fine. I think this is a spot where he's deciding, hey, I'm very close to winning. Let's just go ahead and put the pedal to the metal. But I think that because of the thing you just mentioned, Carson's going to be able to sweep the board here and maybe come out on top at the end of everything.
Yeah, the enormous turn Kurt set up was thanks to having those characters in play to sing with. And right off the bat, Frank sings grab your sword with that aerial that Kurt decided to leave alone.
Okay, that's step one. Step two is either sing or cast another Grab Your Sword. And I
Oh,
don't
he
think he's
doesn't
got
actually
it.
have access. That uninkable card is a Lilo making a wish.
All right. Well, I think we can maybe get to a spot where we can not die this turn, but maybe not. We have to get rid of at least 2 characters, and oh, even getting rid of 2 characters not enough. Hmm. All right. Bad way for Frank. Let's see if he's got anything from hand. Gonna need something with Rush, which I don't think he plays much of. Another Grab Your Sword, which I don't think he has. A couple Smashes, which I don't know if he has one.
Yep,
17
counting it
more.
out
Mm-hmm.
and kind of walking off the edge here.
Yeah. Well, actually, he has a whole new world, so we could do a Desperation Whole New World, and then that could potentially find us a combination of things that could perhaps help.
Yeah, the problem is you need, I think, both second grab your sword and a Tinkerbell. The
Ah.
Rapunzel, the Rockstar, and the Captain Hook would all survive through just a grab your sword. So Frank's not really gonna have enough ink, but oh, interesting route.
Gonna cast Rockstar. Gonna play Lilo and draw. Finds a Prince Eric. Gonna play Hook and draw. Be our guests.
That ain't it.
Nope. It looks like Kurt Spiess is gonna be moving to 2-0 in our first pod of the day. Draw a card. That's not it. Now, unless lore totals are wrong,
There it is.
we're over. And Frank extends the hand. Kurt Spiess moves it 2-0 with his unique and awesome take on Amber Steel Stitch Blitz. Let's go ahead and head on back to the booth. We're going to go over what our top 4 players left so far that are currently undefeated. Since we're 2 pods of 8, we're 2 rounds in, which means we have currently 4 undefeated players. That's going to mark Kurt as our 4th undefeated. And so for our winners matches, we're going to see who makes it into the top 8. We're going to go for the winners first next round, and we're going to be watching Matt Campo, one of our invitational qualifiers from last night, against Krista O. She defeated Dawn Delozier, and we're going to be watching world champion of Magic the Gathering Nathan Stoyer versus Kurt Spiess, who we just watched, and those are going to be the matches we're going to be watching in round number 3. It's going to do it for round number 2 of the Lost Boys Invitational. For Bo, Madam, Tandy, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to bring you the first people to make it into day 2 of the Invitational. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.